From libraries.org, Banned Books Week celebrates the freedom to read, spotlighting current and historical attempts to censor books in libraries and schools. For 40 years, the annual event has brought together the entire book community. So librarians, booksellers, publishers, journalists, teachers, readers of all types, in shared support of freedom to seek and to express ideas, even those some consider unorthodox or unpopular. The books featured during Banned Books Week have all been targeted for removal or restriction in libraries and schools. By focusing on efforts across the country to remove or restrict access to books, Banned Books Week draws national attention to the harms of censorship. In a time of intense political polarization, library staff in every state are facing an unprecedented number of attempts to ban books. The American Library Association's Office for Intellectual Freedom tracked 729 challenges to library, school, and university materials and services in 2021, resulting in more than 1,597 individual book challenges or removals. Most targeted books were by or about Black or LGBTQIA+ persons. And that number's only gone up. The theme for Banned Books Week 2022 is Books Unite Us, Censorship Divides Us. Sharing stories that are important to us means sharing part of ourselves. Books reach across boundaries and build connections between readers. Censorship, on the other hand, creates barriers. Banned Books Week is both a reminder of the unifying power of stories and the divisiveness of censorship, and a call to action for readers across the country to push back against censorship attempts in their community. As the American Library Association Office of Intellectual Freedom states, this is a dangerous time for readers and the public servants who provide access to reading materials. Readers, particularly students, are losing access to critical information, and librarians and teachers are under attack for doing their jobs. I'm the director of Rock Island Library. By the way, my name is Angela Campbell. I've been in the profession for now 25 years in December, and I have never felt as under attack as I do probably this past year, and it's only getting worse. Tonight, I will be reading later, but I'm more excited to hear everybody else read, and I'm always excited to know that there are people out there that do believe if you don't like something, you have a choice not to read it as much as if you do like it, you can read it. So thank you to the Writing Center. I love partnering with them on this important thing that we've done every year for almost probably a decade. So thank you for coming, and I think I'll turn it over to you guys.
Angela. Yeah, not the same things to say, but a couple things I just wanted to echo. And this is just, I mean, you can find, if you are not familiar or you have not been to the ALA Banned Book site, I highly recommend you go. There's a ton of information there, lists of top 10 banned books for the last couple of years. If you're wondering what they have in common, most of them, most of them have been banned, challenged, or restricted for LGBTQIA+ content or having something to do with race. Almost all of them in every single instance, but maybe like one. So you see a pattern developing when you go and look at those resources. There's a pattern. I was just talking to somebody earlier today about this very sad phenomenon. And it's not really so much about the content so much as it is the exercise of power over content. That's not for anyone else to decide with you, but us, individually, each of us. When we go to the library, we go to the bookstore, when we go wherever to get whatever content it is that we want to read. Anyone who's putting restrictions on that is not your friend. But explicitly, I'll put it more explicitly than us, like the library and all this stuff. I have a lot of feelings about the subject, but I figured I would just, I am not reading tonight. Oh, yay, young folks, what's up, y'all? That's good. That's what we want to see. We got a good number of readers tonight. I will say that we did invite a lot of people. We invite people from every library. Yeah, so I wish there was more participation. It's a thing that people like to talk about. Talking about it and showing up for it. So thank you to all of you for showing up for it. It's the road. It's easy to talk. It's hard to do. I just wanted to read a couple of quotes from an article that I would highly recommend to all of you. It was just published. It was published yesterday in the Guardian, so you can get it. It won't be paywall. It will be free of access. You don't have any of that Washington Post, New York Times, nasty headline that you can't read to give us money. The headline of the article is "We Move Backwards. U.S. librarians face unprecedented attacks amid right-wing book bans." I'm going to kind of skip through just a couple like kind of factoid things so people kind of know what we're talking about here. Conservative parent groups that formed to oppose mask mandates during the pandemic, only to pivot against the fight against critical race theory, have now begun to focus on scrutinizing books, often by and about queer and Black people, and lobbying for the removal from library shelves. Politicians have hopped on the bandwagon, drafting legislation to supposedly protect children against indoctrination and predation, calling out books by name and making it impossible for people who run schools and libraries to do their jobs. Fringe activists and government officials are taking to social media, holding meetups, and riling up their bases with reports of indoctrination, propaganda, and the supposedly pornographic materials that lurk on the bookshelves of public institutions. Done, done, done. Sound effect line. To continue, just a couple of statistical things to kind of jump off what Angel was saying. So this is a little bit later in the article. The American Library Association documented 729 attempts to censor library materials in 2021, targeting 1,597 titles. While those figures were more than double the typical number in previous years, the group counted 681 challenges to 1,651 titles in just the first 8 months of this year, putting the U.S. on track for an unprecedented year of censorship. Since last fall, Taslyn Magnuson, I apologize if I messed up the name, has tried to track individual cases of book challenges through a spreadsheet. The aspiring new adult authors, however, document has multiple tabs that unfurl like sea scrolls. Works by authors Jesmyn Ward and John Updike appear in its columns, as does a Michelle Obama biography for young readers and a book called Between Shades of Grey, a middle-aged historical novel that Magnuson imagines some people are confusing with E.L. James' racy 50 Shades of Grey. I love that, just to point out like the stupidity of it. And if you were under any illusion that any of this really had to do with the people trying to do the banning, their familiarity with the content, they are not familiar. They're looking at synopses, they're looking at reviews. That's like, to me, like, you know, the kind of like hilariously ironic thing about this, but also like deeply sad in what it says about, I think you could extrapolate this pretty widely in terms of people who have really strong feelings about a lot of things, who have very little to no knowledge about those things at all. Which is, you know, just another reason to, like, you know, celebrate and champion your local libraries. It goes on to talk about some of those groups by name, both some of the groups that are doing the banning, which I would recommend you familiarize yourself with, because you'll probably be hearing from them, unfortunately, if they're not already making their presence known locally. But also to go on to talk about, you know, the difficulties that libraries and their staffs are experiencing. One librarian who's kind of a feature of the article. I'm going to make sure it was right. It's from St. Charles City in Missouri. Was talking about how their staff has had to go through active shooter drills as a result of all the sort of pressure and people coming to the library and stirring up things and stuff like that. So yeah, it's never been this real. I mean, it seems like the last few years, every time we do this, we've had to do this online a few times, but it's like this continues to escalate, that escalation has, you know, gone up by orders of magnitude. So I think it's really important that we do this. I think it's really important that we talk about this because it's not just a publishing issue or a library issue. It's an information issue. It's a free expression issue. And that really does impact everybody. A lot of these same people are very, very happy to bring up the Bill of Rights, and they sort of skip the first one. If you have patience for those people, I would encourage you to be less patient. True. Good. That's how this gets stopped. is by pushing back, not like hoping, like, or just like offing the responsibility for pushing back on this to your local library, to your libraries and their staffs, because they're busy doing all the good work that libraries do, right? And that's part of what they do, obviously, but like they need community support, particularly on this issue, maybe now more than ever. So thank you again for being here. And with that, I'll stop reading from the Guardian. Also introducing our readers. I really do recommend, and then the Guardian, I think, is doing a series of articles all throughout the end of this week, so you can kind of like get different facets and different perspectives on this issue. They published another one today. I didn't spend as much time with it because work and doing things and stuff like that. So in any event, let's get on with the reading. I'm really excited to hear what books people have. This for the first time I didn't keep a list, so I don't know if this is the first time I've seen the bios. I don't know what people are reading. So in this way, I guess I'm like, oh, y'all enjoy it. Surprising. So our first reader tonight, excuse me, is Ethan Wint, who's a freshman at St. Andrews University and a forever goofball. What a great description. So far, he's been published in the Atlas 17, which is a publication that the Midwest Writing Center Press publishes, and hoping for even more publications. I think you can plan on that. When he's not busy rewatching old movies, he's also watching new movies and always tries to find time to write. He does that very well. Please welcome Ethan Wint.
Does this sound good? Okay, yeah, I can talk a little louder. So, yeah, today I'm going to be reading Mouse, and I first read this book. My parents had it in their bookshelf for a long time, and I had seen it here and there. But I think I first read it and its follow-up, a companion, Mouse 2, obviously, around the year of 2021. Which was about a year before the news of the sort of infamous Tennessee banning of 2022, which definitely stirred a lot of people up because, I mean, this is history. How are you going to just ban history? And the sort of reasoning they went with was the idea of like coarse languages and partial female nudity. But at the end of the day, regardless of whatever reasoning they had, you can't just paint a pretty picture of these horrible atrocities because we can't have anything like this happen again or even be shown in any sort of positive light. So I'm going to start by just reading a short excerpt. Around near the middle, this is right after when Vladek Spiegelman got out of the prisoner of war camp and went back to his home. Started seeing some of the things that were happening where the Nazis were becoming much more oppressive against the Jewish people. And a little later, I was again on Madrid, and before I continue, I just want to apologize for any pronunciation. I'll try my best, but a little later, I was again on Madrid Zajawska, looking to buy some textiles without coupons. The SS closed off the whole street to inspect the working papers from everyone. I didn't know before about this. I managed to disappear into a building, but they took maybe 50% of the people away. I talked about it to father-in-law. They almost got me. I'll need more than just Ilzeki's note. It's true. Come, we'll visit a friend of mine who owns a tin shop. I think his overseer can be bribed. And so it went. Okay, Vladek, since we make things for Jeremy, we can get you a priority work card. Remember, there's a roundup running here and pretend you're working. I learned here to do things that were useful to me when I came to Auschwitz. And so we lived for more than a year, but always things came a little worse. Father-in-law had a nice new bedroom set. The Germans looked to grab such furniture because in stores it wasn't any more to get. Wolf and I schlepped everything valuable downstairs for a Polish neighbor to hide. Are we leaving the other bed upstairs? Yeah, mother-in-law is too sick. She needs a good bed. Anya's mother had gallstones. The day the Germans came, she lay in the bed. Please don't take her bed. Look at how sick she is. The doctor is here every day. Father-in-law had an old friend who came always over to play cards. And they left without taking anything. You know, I met a German official who would pay well for a bedroom set. Hidden, we had no use from the furniture, so we schlepped it again upstairs to sell. You have excellent taste in furniture, Earl Zilberberg. Thank you. Women will be right back to get your wife's bed too. You cheated us last time, Jew. Wait, I haven't been paid yet. Please, if you want to stay alive, go back inside. We were so unhappy after. So unhappy. One time I was going to see Ilzeki. This was late in 1941, I think. His house was very near to a train station. It was going on there something terrible. I had to pass near, and they were grabbing Jews, if they had papers or no. What had I to do? While I walk slowly, they will take me. Will I run, they can shoot me. Then from far I saw Ilzeki walking, so I went hasty over to him. Hello, Mr. Spiegelman, what are you doing here? Don't you see what's going on? Quick, come upstairs with me until the trains leave. Ilzeki lived in a very fancy house. He was the only Jew there. So I sat with him and his wife a good few hours. We heard shooting and screams. He survived me my life that time. Ilzeki had a son the same age like Richia. If you could see how those children played together. Listen, Vlad, we can't know what's going to happen to us, but we must keep our children safe. I have a good friend, a Pole, who's willing to hide my son until the situation gets better. I think he'd take your boy too. Yes, you may be right. Let me speak with my family. I'm telling you, it was something terrible going on in our house when I even mentioned it. What? You've gone crazy? How can you even think of giving your child up to complete strangers? I'll never give up my baby. Never. Ilzeki and his wife didn't come out from the war, but his son remained alive. Ours did not. And anyway, we had to give Richia to hide a year later. When we were in the ghetto in 1943, Tasha took all the children to wait. Please, Dad, if you don't keep your story chronological, I'll never get it straight. Tell me more about 1941 and 1942. So, okay, I'll make it so how you want. 1941? The end of 1941, the Germans came with something new. Wolf ran from the Gemeinde. Look, they're putting these up all over town. Order. All Jews of Sosnowiec must be relocated into the Stara Sosnowiec quarter by January 1st, 1942. Non-Jews will be moved into vacated premises. All 12 of our household were given now to live in 2.5 small rooms. Most people got even less space. My father-in-law and Wolf had little influence. But this wasn't yet a real ghetto. Still, you could go into other parts of town so long you were home at night. Hold the ladder, Anya. I'm putting a curtain to give us some privacy. Tasha insisted on getting the part of the room with the window. It doesn't matter, Gladys. I'm just glad the whole family can stay together. It was no more the luxury life we had before. For a couple months, I did hear still my black market business. Then came more bad news. Very bad. What's wrong, Father? They just arrested my friend, Nahum Khan, and his son. They've taken 4 Jews away for dealing goods without coupons. I did much business with Khan. The Germans intend to make an example of them. The next day, I walked over to Andrzejowska Street and I saw them. They hanged there 1 full week. Khan had a dry goods store. He was known all over Sosnowiec. Not that he gave me cloth with no coupons. I traded also with Pfeffer, a fine young man, a Zionist. He was just married. His wife ran screaming in the street. I was frightened to go outside for a few days. I didn't want to pass where they were hanging. Maybe one of them could have talked of me to the Germans to try to save themselves. When I think of them now, it still makes me cry. Look, even from my dead eye, tears are coming down. What was Anya doing that around this time? Houseworks and knitting, reading, and she was writing always her diary. I used to see Polish notebooks around the house as a kid. Were those her diaries? Yes, and also no. Her diaries didn't survive from the war. What you saw, she wrote after. Her whole story from the start. Oh my God, where are they? I need those for this book. Cough, please, Artie, stop with the smoking. It makes me short of breath. I think it's all your pen. Don't be so smart. What was I telling you? Yes, after the hanging, I looked for another business. I started to trade gold and jewelry. It was easier to hide than clothing. I kept things hidden in the child's stroller, and I made a few zlotys. For a while, I had also a food business that I didn't yet tell you. I met Skolarczyk. Sorry again, but the big grocery on Andrzejowska. He's Zilberberg's son, right? Come inside and wait for the rain to stop. So together we sat and spoke, and he helped from time to time with the customer. Sorry, we don't have enough coupons to buy half a kilo of sugar. Still, she went out with half a kilo. I smelled I could arrange something. Maybe you could sell my extra items small shops in the area under the counter. It was dangerous to carry these things, but maybe I could do that. When somebody's hungry, he looks for business. One time I had 10 or 15 kilos sugar to deliver. Halt, Jew, what are you carrying? What was I supposed to say? For this I could really pay. Sugar. I'm taking it over to my grocery store. Oh, you have a shop? I made so they would think it was legal. I went to the back door where I had to deliver. Open up, Holdeck. I've got our sugar. He let me go without even checking my papers. But when we came to start our social village, all my businesses became harder. It was not so easy to move around. The tin shop finished. The owner was the only Jew they let work there. I got them a job in a German carpentry shop. Father-in-law and Moldeck worked already there for really no money. I didn't need this before, but now I had to have the work paper. Wolf could have arranged me a job at the combined, but I didn't want to put my hands there where Jews were being taken. And then it came again, something new from the Germans. We got a note. All Jews over 70 years old will be transferred to Kingery in Czechoslovakia on May 10, 1942. A community better prepared to take care of the elderly than ours in Sosnovich. It doesn't look too bad, like a convalescent home. Anya's grandparents had about 90 years. We've been together, a family, for 70 years. We don't want to break apart now. Don't worry, we won't let them take you. We didn't yet know of Auschwitz, of the ovens, but we were afraid, anyway afraid. So in the yard, we made a hiding place, a bunker. We sneaked food to them, and when it was safe, we took them inside a little. Several times came the Jewish police to our house. Our records show that Mr. and Mrs. Carmio live here. They have it registered for transfer. Yes, my wife's parents. They left without a word a month ago. Jewish police? Yes, with big sticks. Some Jews thought in this way, if they gave to the Germans a few Jews, they could save the rest, and at least they could save themselves. And a month after, they again came to father-in-law. Mr. Zilberberg, you and your wife must come with us. If the Carnios don't turn up in 3 days, you two will be sent in their place. He had still a little protection from the Gemeinde, so they took only him away, not his wife. He sat a few days there, then he sent us a note. He wrote that we had to give over the grandparents, even if they took only him away now. Next, they would grab his wife and then the rest of the family. So what happened? What happened? We had to deliver them. They thought it was to Theresienstadt they were going. Let us know if you need anything. But they went right away to Auschwitz, to the gas. That's quick. I wanted to see, you probably aren't going to see it super well, but obviously this is a comic, and so during the scene where they got the people square, you can fix it in a really graphic way, but it's necessary, obviously. Otherwise, there's really not a lot of hope of having these things stay dead, having these horrible, awful atrocities never happen again.
At the German American Heritage Center. Yeah. Saturdays. We have one here. It's the third.
We actually have a art discussion on the cat.
I did see that, yes.
Yeah.
So we want to hand
Well, that be- And yeah, I mean, perfect example of, one of the many ulterior motives for banning books is to, obfuscate, obscure, rewrite history, pretend things didn't happen, soften history, make it more palatable, because maybe some people would like to repeat some of those things. I don't know. Thank you very much for getting us going with that. Our next reader is Melissa Conlon, who's a Midwest poet. Their interest in reading was sparked by artists who never shy away from honesty and selfhood. You can find Melissa's own book, Sundog, The Artsy Bookworm, online or in person. Happy reading. Please welcome Melissa Conlon.
US Reading Center, the library did do this every year, and this is the first year I've been able to come, so I was really excited. And every time I see the invites, I always think about my 7th grade English teacher, shout out Mrs. London, who, I'm pointing to the camera, Sarah. But she always talked about the importance of banned books and understanding why people don't want you to read certain things, not just knowing these books are good because they're allowed, these books are bad because they're not, but understanding why are you being told you shouldn't read this, really emphasizing that banned book lists are some of the most poignant to be read lists that you can have. So I'm just really excited to be here. The book that I wanted to read today is Genderqueer, Evermore by Kovid. I think this is just such a beautiful graphic novel. So the art's amazing and the story is amazing. And it really is just a very honest story about growing up genderqueer and growing up and trying to understand yourself. The first time I read it, I got really emotional. So I just think it's such a beautiful, honest story that each stage of life is so true to what that stage of life is. And so true to all of the weird and embarrassing things that you would never do at that age and all of the different things that everyone experiences, but also the added layer of complication of what if you don't know anybody else who's experiencing things the way you are. And I just think that a book like this, when I was growing up, would have really, really helped me not feel quite so afraid to be myself. And so it just kind of breaks my heart that there are people who are trying to keep kids like me from reading something that can make them feel normal and understood and seen. So I'm really happy to read some excerpts today. I'm going to skip around a little bit just to get some different sections read. Since it is a graphic novel, a lot of it is a little weird to read to an audience, so I'm going to do my best to know what page I'm on. So page 47. The table where my friends and I ate lunch every day was not more than 50 feet from the QSA meeting of the next Friday afternoon. My friends chatted as usual, while I vibrated with nervous energy. Finally, I got up the courage to say, I'm going to check out the QSA meeting. I'll see you later, okay? Oh, okay. One day, my best friend gave me a note. It read, don't read any more gay romances. You get absolutely unbearable for days after. But by the end of the year, she started coming to QSA meetings with me. This group morphed into a Lord of the Rings fan club, with meetings devolving into hours of discussion about which of Lord of the Ring actors were most likely to be gay. First section, and I'll be honest, that section made me cry the very first time I read it. I think I just, like me and a lot of people like me, spent so long being kids, really scared that your friends aren't going to accept you and people won't accept you, and just that little section about when my friends came around and now we have a Lord of the Rings fan club was just, I don't know, I think really beautiful. Page 64. The main trait I've always been attracted to is androgyny. Did the girl with the buzz cut catch my eye because she was a girl or because she was dressed as a boy? Which made categorizing my sexuality difficult. Was it his seemingly feminine or masculine qualities that drew me to the long-haired boy in the choir? My deepest emotional relationships have always been with women. Did that mean I was a lesbian? But my sexual fantasies always involved 2 male partners. Was I a gay boy trapped in a girl's body? The knowledge of a third option slept like a seed under the soil. Page 70. If I was trans, wouldn't I be saying I am a boy, not I wish I was a boy? Wouldn't I be more sure? And if I am trans, am I a gay boy or a straight boy or a bisexual boy? Except I'm not sure if I ever want to have sex. Does that mean I'm asexual? If I'm asexual, does my gender even matter? So I can just be a girl, but I don't feel like a girl. So what am I? I didn't share these questions, even with my friends from QSA. Instead, I poured my confusion into journal after journal, 14 notebooks from 2001 to 2014. Page 120. The clearest metaphor I had for my own gender identity in college was the image of a scale. A huge weight had been placed on one side without my permission. I was constantly trying to weigh down the other side. But the end goal wasn't masculinity. The goal was balance. Dressing up as a male character let me play with the idea of how I would choose to present myself if the weight of assigned sex had been placed on the other side of the scale. And then page 191. As I pondered a pronoun change, I began to think of gender less as a scale and more as a landscape. Some people are born in the mountains, while others are born by the sea. Some people are happy to live in the place they were born, while others must make a journey to reach the climate in which they can grow and flourish. Between the ocean and the mountains is a wild forest. That is where I want to make my home. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. And that book, just for the record, according to the American Library Association, was the most banned book in 2020. So, yeah. And like another, just like, you're not letting people read something that, like when you write, it's one of the important things about reading. So you can see other people's lives are like, people like have other experiences that are not your experiences, your wider sense of the world. And sometimes those things help us maybe see ourselves a little bit better or a little more fully, and things like that. So like, it's just one of like many, probably countless things that are robbed by these kind of issues, I guess you would say. Thank you again for reading. Our next reader is from Rock Island Public Library. It's Lockhart. We'll be reading from the book Whale Talk, awesome book, Whale Talk, by young adult fiction writer Chris Crutcher. Excuse me, can't talk. Please.
Yeah, so Whale Talk by Chris Crutcher, which fortunately has been reissued with a much better cover. This is the older cover. And I was able to read it on our Hoopla digital content option for Rock Island Public Library. So Chris Crutcher is known nationally as a no-nonsense author of serious novels for young adults. Known for real language and realistic situations, he's a frequent target of challenges and bans. And Whale Talk was actually one of the 10 most frequently challenged books of 2005. And while it's an older title, the book's themes of racism, of being an outsider in an almost all-white community, toxic masculinity are just as relevant today. It's really held up very well. And the book was challenged by a school board in Limestone County for racism and offensive language. And I believe that was Alabama, by the way. The school board removed the title from 5 high school libraries because of its use of profanity. You can't allow students to go down the halls and say these words, and you shouldn't let them read it, said one board member in the spokesman review. The book's got a lot of bad words. And it's true, the language is kind of rough and real, but Crutcher, who's been a family therapist for 30 years, notes on his website that words can be a teaching tool. He said, censors make a case for zero tolerance in language, but you can deal with it in the classroom situation. You can bring up the offensiveness of the language and talk about how it's used to make a story real. But you don't have to use the language to talk about the story in the classroom, but you can certainly talk about the raw power of any good story told in its native tongue. So the book is the story of TJ, a minority teen who assembles a team of misfits to swim competitively in a school that really only values football and basketball and mostly the male versions of basketball. Banding together in an environment that's at times dismissive and at other times outright threatening, the team finds acceptance in each other. So let's meet TJ. The facts. I'm Black and Japanese and white. Politically correct would be African American, Japanese American, and what? Northern European American? God, by the time I wrote all that on a job application, the position would be filled. Besides, I've never been to Africa, never been to Japan, and don't know which countries make up Northern Europe. I know next to nothing about the individuals who contributed all that exotic DNA, so it's hard to carve out a cultural identity in my mind. So, mixed, blended, puree, potpourri, adopted. Big deal, so is Superman. And like Superman, I was adopted by great people. The woman I call mom, who is mom, Abby Jones, was in the hospital following her fourth miscarriage and final attempt at a miracle birth, where she met my biological mother, Glenda, right after my presumed bio dad, Stephen, had assisted in my natural childhood, only to come eyeball to eyeball with the aforementioned UNICEF poster boy. A second generation German American married to a woman of Swiss Norwegian descent, he was a goner before my toes could the wet stuff. Anyway, he matched up the fruit flies. He couldn't come up with me. Because my mom was one of those magic people with the natural capacity to make folks in shitty situations feel less shitty, she consoled Glenda and even brought her home until she could help get her feet on the ground. Evidently, Glenda was as surprised as Stephen. She had a one-night stand with my sperm donor to get even for a good thumping, and had no idea the tall, black Japanese poet Suzuki swimmer was that one in a billion to crash through into the promised land. Things spread rapidly downhill for Glenda as a single mother, and 2 years later, when she brought child protection services crashing down like herself, getting heavily into crack and prank and heavily out of taking care of me, she remembered mom's kindness, tracked her down, and begged her to take me. Mom and dad didn't blink, almost as if they were expecting me to hear to have a pellet. And all of a sudden, I was the Rainbow Coalition kid of two white, awkwardly mobile ex-children of the 60s. With a little head. It's interesting being a color in a part of the country where Mark Furman has had his own radio talk show. My parents have always encouraged me to be loud when I run into racism, but I can't count on racism being loud when it runs into me. Very few people come out and say they don't like you because you aren't white. When you're younger, it comes at a birthday party, you learn about only after the fact, or later, having a girl say yes to a date, only to come back after discussing it with her parents, having suddenly remembered she has another engagement that night. Not much to do about that, but let it register and don't forget it. I learned in grade school that the color of a person's skin has to do only with where their long, way ago, long ancestors originated. So my mind tells me that racists are either ignorant or so down on themselves they need somebody to be better than. Most of the time, telling myself that works. Once in a while, my gut feels rank on my mind and I'm compelled to get hungry. So I'm going to skip forward a little bit just for time. So his teacher, Mr. Simmet, who is his journalism and English teacher, takes him aside and wants him to form a swim club, mainly because Mr. Simmet doesn't want to coach wrestling and he's being pressed to coach something. So he gives TJ a kind of sales pitch on it, asks him to consider it because TJ is a natural athlete, but has never participated in school sports because he finds it all ridiculous. So, next. Variation on the theme. I'm moving cat-like through the halls toward my locker, minutes after Mr. Simmet has challenged me to become the Mark Spitz of the desert. We don't have a swimming pool. And run into Mike Barber, linebacker extraordinaire and student most likely to graduate with multiple felonies, jacking up Chris Coughlin against the lockers by the drinking fountain because Chris is wearing his dead brother's leather jacket. Chris Coughlin is big-time special ed. He's mainstreamed into PE and industrial arts, but spends most of his time in resource rooms improving his reading skills enough to read traffic signs and memorizing basic addition and subtraction. Everyone knows Chris's story. Born addicted to crack cocaine, and then got a double dose of shit just after his first birthday when his mother's boyfriend wrapped his face in saran wrap to make him stop crying. At his sentencing, the boyfriend said he only wanted to make Chris pass out, not cause permanent brain damage. Oops. Anyway, Chris's aunt and uncle took him and did all they could to make it up to him, but they couldn't regenerate brain cells. Chris's older half-brother, Brian, was raised by his own biological father and is something of a legend around Cutter 4 or 5 years ago for having gained more yards in football and for hitting more home runs in baseball than any Cutter Wolverine before or since, and for being drafted into the Cincinnati Reds farm system out of high school. He was destined to have a street or a small park named after him someday, but he was killed in a freak rock climbing accident in the spring of his senior year. That about did poor old Chris in. He didn't have much, but he had a famous big brother. Brian was a real class act, good student, good athlete, great guy. The only times I remember seeing Chris smile was when he rode behind Brian on his dirt bike, or later after Brian was gone, when he bragged to anyone who would listen every time he passed Brian's picture in the trophy case. They didn't live together, but Brian sure let everyone know Chris was his brother, and if you messed with Chris back in those days, and he was an easy mark, you could expect a visit from Brian. So Barbara has the jacket buttoned at the bottom and pulled down around Chris's shoulders so he can't move his arm, and his nose is about 1 inch from Chris's. I can't hear what he's saying, but tears squirt out of Chris's terrified eyes and his entire body trembles. I hustle over and insert myself between them, put an arm over Chris's shoulder and say, "What's the matter, buddy? You look like you've been staring into a giant asshole." And move him a full steps down the hall, adjusting the jacket. Chris is hyperventilating, barely able to breathe. "When you see one of those," I tell him, loud enough for Barbara to hear, "you gotta close your eyes and pretend it's not there. Of course, it also helps if you hold your breath." Barbara's hand clamps on my shoulder, and I turn in mock surprise. "Barbara, what's up, man?" "I was talking to him, shithead." "That's Mr. Shithead, it's you. You were talking to my buddy Chris. He has to get to class. I run his complaint department though, right, Chris?" Still speechless, Chris nods. Barbara says, "Fine, I'll tell you. Next time I see him in this jacket, I'll take it off and burn it. You earn one of these if you're going to wear it at this school. Something you're too chicken shit to know anything about. It's an honor to wear these colors. You don't put on the jacket your brother earned. That's an athletic department rule." I say, "That doesn't apply. Chris isn't in the athletic department." And Barbara says, "Well, yeah, in this school, the athletic department rule is a school rule." "Yes, that wasn't in my orientation packet," I say. "What's the matter with you, Barbara? You know the deal with Kaufman's brother. Is this prick thing habitual or do you work at it? One of these days you're going to find out, Jones. Lie awake nights waiting for that day." Barbara said, "I'll save my energy for a white man." "Because of your limited IQ, I'll give you one of those, my friend. One more will get us over 3-day suspension." Barbara's family is famous for their send all the jabs back to Jack Payne, each arm attitude, so I feel like I have to hold my own. We stand facing each other a few seconds, and finally Barbara reiterates the athletic department's zero tolerance position on letter jackets and walks away. I pat Chris's shoulder and tell him not to worry about it and start for class, but look back to see him stuffing the jacket into his locker, trying in vain to cram it behind his books. I walk back, pull the jacket out, and hand it to him. "Chris, wear it. It's okay." "He said it was a rule." He lied. You can wear it anytime you want. "He said the athletic department, that's a rule." "It belongs to your brother, Chris. You wear it. If Barbara gives you any more trouble, you come see me, okay?" Chris stares at me. "Okay?" "Okay." He says it without conviction. As I turn the corner for class, I glance back against, and Kaufman is frantically stuffing the jacket back into the locker. Later on, PJ finds the jacket in a dumpster. Chris was too afraid to wear it. He's going away, so he retrieves it. And then goes over to All Night Fitness, which has a 20-yard pool that they're supposed to train in, see if they can train in it. Since it's the only indoor pool in town, All Night rents it for parties and YMCA swim lessons and women's and seniors water aerobics classes. I hope to swim a few laps to get a feel, but the sign on the entrance says private group. A young man and women in Y t-shirts stand with lifeguard poles at either side of the pool, and Y staff people are spread out through the crowd, like Secret Service at the White House Easter egg roll. Political correctness aside, the water and deck are filled with kids who look like they'll be getting the very best parking places for the rest of their life. In the far lane, Chris Coughlin helps a little girl with shriveled arms on a kickboard. The girl locks her gnarled elbows over the styrofoam board and kicks while Chris pulls her along. The noise is deafening, but I watch him patiently help her extend her feet, toes pointed inward to propel herself properly, then release the board long enough to let her move under her own power for a few kicks until she becomes still in the water. Then he pulls her a little further. I am struck with how completely comfortable he seems in the water. His brother's jacket is still in my car, and I intend to go get it. But when I yell to get his attention, he glances up and quickly away, and I know my presence embarrasses him, so I just wave. He looks ashamed. How messed up is that? You get treated like shit, and you have to be ashamed that you're the kind of person people treat like shit. I stay a few minutes, imagine myself trying to get a decent workout in that abbreviated pool. It doesn't look promising. But as I drive through the quiet, dusty streets of that uncharacteristically warm Cutter, Idaho fall, Chris's ease in the water flashes before me, and suddenly the mathematics, the relativity of it all hits me. If it kills Barbara to see a guy as far out of the mainstream as Chris is, wearing a leather jacket that doesn't belong to him, how far up his nose will it get when he sees him wearing one that does belong? And suddenly I hear the voice that the universe and Mr. Simmons wants me to hear. It says, swim.
Yeah, he was here, I guess now it's not quite a few years ago, but, you know. I don't want to do, oh, did you really? Yes, I don't want to do the math on that. But like, I got to shepherd him around a little bit too, and like, one of the things I remember him talking about that I thought was like pretty powerful on stage was like this idea of coarse language. That's another common phrase in all of this, like, or what is it, profane language, it's different, whatever. Yeah. You get the idea. And like talking about it, like, and this goes kind of beyond books, it's sort of like language, how to use it. That like people, you know, these reactions, like, oh, that's coarse language. I don't like cursing, whatever. Like, that's fine. We all understand your particular whatever, but like if you're getting caught up in the particular vocabulary that someone is using and you're not paying attention to what they're actually saying, you can get played real easy because there's a whole lot of people who are really good at using nice, fun sounding, sweet sounding words that pass off really evil shit on you all the time. And if you can't tell the difference, then you're stuck. You know where it is. What's that?
Let's go, Brent.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, also if you're gonna get down like that, you know, if you're a grown adult, you know, just speak the words as they are. That's a whole other consideration that we should have. But like, it's just worth considering, like, when you hear, oh wow, the way the person talks, like maybe listen to what they're saying a little bit more than like this or that word that makes it, you know, recall a little bit or whatever, because there's probably something more to it. There's that relates to like grammar in general, the idea that there's only one grammar. This isn't a classroom, we won't get into that now. Our next reader actually, we'll just keep it with the Rock Island Public Library, and I'll welcome back up the director of the Rock Island Public Library, Angela Campbell. Angela, please.
Segue because I have a potty mouth really bad. So actually, I was going to tell you something else. That's okay. We're going to bring it up. Well, tonight, I'm going to read from a book, a young adult book called Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, and it was on one of the most banned books of this past year. And I had never heard of it. I don't really stay up on young adult literature, even though I do really enjoy reading it. But it was banned for profanity and it degrades women. So well, that sounds like politics. I don't know. I didn't really find it too degrading, but I don't know. But anyway, let's see. I'm gonna read the front cover because it'll give you the plot. Me, my name is Greg Gaines. I am 17. I am the one who wrote this book. My physical appearance is unsatisfactory, and there's probably a fungus eating my brain. I'm not even sure I'm human. Earl Jackson is the only person who even is sort of my friend. We make mediocre films together. Werner Herzog is our biggest influence. Earl is generally filled with violent rage. Dying girl. During my senior year, my mom forced me to become friends with a girl who had cancer. This brought about the destruction of my entire life. So that sums up the plot. I'm going to read from chapter 18. It's entitled Drugs Are the Worst. And Greg and Earl accidentally get high. In the previous chapter, they eat something that has marijuana in it and they didn't know. So they didn't know where to go after school. So they went to the dying girl, Rachel's house, to hide out. What can go wrong? So our first obstacle was Denise. Denise is Rachel's mom. Hello, Greg, she said. She seemed preoccupied. She was also giving Earl the crazy eye, sort of like if I had showed up on her doorstep with a llama. And who might this be? Earl and I said something at the same time. Sorry? Then neither of us said anything. I'm Denise. And Denise said eventually. Earl Jackson, said Earl too loudly. I eyed him fearfully. When talking with adults, Earl often becomes brash and combative. I knew this was not going to go over well with Denise, so I started talking. This turned out to be a tactical error. What not on drugs, Greg would have said. Earl's a good friend of mine. He wanted to wish Rachel well. Is she upstairs? What on drugs, Greg ended up saying. Earl's one of my best friends, and we were just hanging out together, like not really doing anything, so it's cool. So we got this text from Rachel about the hair loss, which, it hasn't happened yet, obviously, so we wanted to see her hair and hang out. Not just see the hair, because the hair, I can take it or leave it. I'm sure she's gonna look great without hair. But we just wanted to hang out, say, what's up, that sort of thing. By the end of this monologue, I was covered in sweat. Meanwhile, Earl was not even trying to hide his disgust. He had his face in his hand and said a word I think was goddamn. Okay, said Denise, sounding uncertain. We were all silent for a while. So is Rachel upstairs? I said eventually. Yeah, of course, said Denise, and she waved us up, and we ran up there right away, ran away from Denise with some extreme quickness. And our second obstacle was Rachel's mistrust of Earl, and also our record-setting drug-related weirdness. I wasn't sure what your text message meant, she said. She was eyeing Earl warily. I had the queasy feeling that she was mistrustful of him because he was Black, although I also felt terrible for thinking that, because that would be accusing a girl of racism who was about to lose all her hair and then probably die. Earl's the man, I said, as if this explained anything. Yeah, you guys send gross text messages to each other. It took me a long, uncomfortable, silent time to remember that this was the only thing I'd ever said to Rachel about Earl. And by the time I remembered that, Earl had already taken some initiative. So, hello, Earl. Silence. I like your room. Thank you. Greg thinks it's too girly. I knew I had to say something here, so I sort of yelled, I do not. Of course it's girly, said Earl. My room doesn't have no James Bond and no thong. What not on drugs, Greg would have said. Yeah, Earl prefers his James Bond posters naked. What on drugs, Greg ended up saying. Longer silence. So I'm getting around to chemo tomorrow, she said. Yeah, that sucks, I said. Dude, what the hell? Earl shoved me. What? Don't say it sucks. Yeah, you're right. Well, it sucks a little bit, said Rachel. Yeah, but it's exciting, I guess. If you get it early, you got a good chance, said Earl, staring at the ground. Yep. Rachel was also staring at the ground, possibly racist silence. Rachel and Earl were clearly not hitting it off. I had to do something. Unfortunately, I had no idea what that thing would be. The silence grew. Rachel continued staring at the ground. Earl started sighing. It was the opposite of a party. It was about the least fun social situation imaginable. If terrorists had burst into the room and tried to suffocate us in hummus, it would have been an improvement. This idea got me thinking about hummus. What is hummus exactly? It's basically a paste. Who eats paste? Especially a paste that resembles cat barf. You can't deny the resemblance here, at least when Cat Stevens barfs, that's his cat. It all looks like hummus. And then part of me like, why do you keep comparing food with barf? And first the alien thing in the cafeteria, and now this, and maybe you have a problem. And that's when I realized I was giggling, but sort of in a nervous, scared way, which made it even more obnoxious than just lighthearted giggling. Earl was pissed. Stop it with your goddamn giggling. But Rachel's reaction was worse. You guys can go if you want, she said, and it sounded like she was about to cry. This was terrible. I felt like such a dickhead. It was time to complain. We're on drugs, I said. Earl had his head in his hands again. What? We accidentally got high. Accidentally? It was time to come sort of clean. Actually, it was high time for a lie time. I totally blacked out. I don't even remember what happened. You did not black out, snapped Earl. No, we both did. The hell are you talking about? Why are you guys on drugs? Asked Rachel. I don't know. I said, I don't know. Then Earl started to say something, and I knew it was going to be about Mr. McCarthy, but I really didn't want to get him fired. So I just started talking. Actually, we went into a bathroom, and there were some guys there, some of the stoner guys, and they were like, you want some weed? And at first we were like, no, we don't want any of your weed. And then we started getting angry. They started getting angry, and they were like, yo, you better smoke some of this or we'll beat the hell out of you. And there were like 20 of them. So we were like, okay, fine. So we smoked with them, but again, I don't totally remember what happened because it blacked out. Immediately obvious holes in the story that I just made up a partial list. One, Earl and I have never visited a bathroom together in our entire lives, probably because that would be weird. Two, stoners do not smoke weed in the bathroom. They smoke weed in old Nissan Altimas about a block and a half from school. Then they're not seen again for hours, sometimes maybe days. Three, no stoner in the history of the world has ever forced anyone to smoke with them. Indeed, many of them are actually delighted not to share their weed with you. There was 20 of them in one bathroom, 20 stoners. Why not say I'm hungry? Why not say a Virgilian, Jesus? What is this? Blacking out business? What would that even mean? So I said all that. Earl was silent. Rachel looked at him for confirmation. At length, he said, yeah, that's what happened. We look like morons, but at least Rachel wasn't on the verge of crying anymore. She looked sort of amused. I hate drugs, I said. I feel like an ass right now. I'm sorry we came over while we were on drugs. Shut your dumb ass up, Earl said to me. You think you're making Rachel feel better? All apologetic and shit. Shut the hell up. Okay, I said. Rachel, continued Earl, who was now in take control mode, to my vast relief, because when Earl takes control, good things happen. We came over here to wish you well and cheer you up, so let's go walk around and get ice cream or something. Holy shit, this was such a good idea. I told you Earl always has the psyche.
Was it banned for its very specific depiction of peer pressure?
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, like, what the hell? Man, come on, this is lemonade fruit. It's drugs. My God, no. There's naughty language in there. Yeah. And we. And anyway, our next reader is Kate Ferentz, who I've never met. No, I'm just kidding. Kate Ferentz can sometimes be found directing, designing, or acting in local theater productions. The rest of the time, she can be found hermiting with her horror books and her cat. Kate Ferentz.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. I am going to read a book called Speak. Speak was published in 1999 and it's a young adult novel by Lori Halls Anderson. It tells the story of a high school freshman, Linda Sordano. Linda is raped at an end of summer party. She calls the police who break up the party. Linda is then ostracized by her peers because she will not say why she called the police. Unable to verbalize what happened, Linda nearly stops speaking altogether, expressing her voice through the art she produces for her art class. This expression slowly helps Linda acknowledge what happened, face her problems, and create her identity. Speak was ranked 60th on the ALA's list of top 100 banned challenge books of 2000 to 2009 and 25th for 2010 to 2019. In 2020, it was named the 4th most banned and challenged book in the United States because it was thought to contain a political viewpoint and it was claimed to be biased against male students and for the novel's inclusion of rape and profanity. The chapter I'm going to be reading from is called the First Amendment. Mr. Neck storms into the class, a bull chasing 33 flags. We slide into our seats. I think for sure he's going to explode, which he does, but in an unpredictable and faintly educational way. Immigration, he writes on the board. I'm pretty sure he spelled it right. Mr. Neck, my family has been in this country for over 200 years. We built this place, fought in every war from the first one to the last one, paid taxes and voted. The cartoon thought bubble forms over the head of every student in class. Let's be on the test. Mr. Neck, so tell me why my son can't get a job. A few hands creep skyward. Mr. Neck ignores them. It is a pretend question. When he asks so he can give the answer, I relax. This is like when my father complains about his boss. The best thing to do is stay awake and blink sympathetically. His son wanted to be a firefighter, but didn't get the job. Mr. Neck is convinced that this is some kind of reverse discrimination. He says we should close our borders so that real Americans can get the jobs they deserve. The job test I took said I would be a good firefighter. I wondered if I could take a job away from Mr. Neck's son. I tune out and focus on my needle, a pine tree. I've been trying to carve a linoleum block in art class. The problem with the block is there's no way to correct mistakes. Every mistake I make is frozen in the picture, so I have to think ahead. Mr. Neck writes on the board again, debate. America should have closed her borders in 1900. That strikes a nerve, several nerves. I can see kids counting backwards on their fingers, trying to figure out when their grandparents or great-grandparents were born, when they came to America, if they would have made the neck cut. When they figure out they would have been stuck in a country that hated them, or a place with no schools, or a place with no future, their hands shoot up. They beg to differ with Mr. Neck's learned opinion. I don't know where my family came from. Someplace cold where they eat beans on Thursday and hang their wash on the line on Monday. I don't know how long we've been in America. We've been in the school district since I was in first grade. That must count for something. I start an apple tree. The arguments jump back and forth across the room. A few stuck-ups or suck-ups quickly figure out which side of Mr. Neck is squatting on, so they fight to throw out the foreigners. Anyone whose family immigrated in the last century has a story to tell about how hard their relatives have worked, the contributions they made to the country, the taxes they pay. A member of the archery club tries to say we are all foreigners and we should give the country back to the Native Americans, but she's very under disagreement. Mr. Neck enjoys the noise until one kid challenges him directly. Brave kid. Maybe your son didn't get that job because he's not good enough, or he's lazy, or the other guy was better than him, no matter what his skin color. I think the white people who've been here for 200 years are the ones pulling down the country. They don't know how to work. They've had it too easy. The pro-immigration forces erupt in applause and hooting. Mr. Neck, you watch your mouth, mister. You're talking about my son. I don't want to hear any more from you. That's enough debate. Get out your books. The Neck is back in control. Showtime is over. I tried to draw a branch coming out of a tree trunk for the 315th time. It looks so flat. A cheap, cruddy drawing. I have no idea how to make it come alive. I am so focused that I don't notice at first that David Petrakis, my lab partner, has stood up. The class stops speaking. I put my pencil down. Mr. Neck. Mr. Petrakis, take your seat. David Petrakis is never, ever in trouble. He is a kid who wins perfect attendance records, who helps the staff chase down bugs in computer files of report cards. I chew a hangnail on my pinky. What is he thinking? Has he flipped? Finally cracked under the pressure of being smarter than everyone? David, if the class is debating, then each student has the right to say what's on his mind. Mr. Neck, I decide who talks in here. David, you open the debate. You can't close it just because it's not going your way. Mr. Neck, watch me. Take your seat, Mr. Petrakis. David, the Constitution does not recognize different classes of citizenship based on time spent living in the country. I am a citizen with the same rights as your son or you. As a citizen and as a student, I am protesting the tone of this lesson as racist, intolerant, and xenophobic. Mr. Neck, sit your butt down in that chair, Petrakis, and watch your mouth. I tried to get a debate going in here, and you people turn it into a race thing. Sit down or you're going to the principal. David stares at Mr. Neck, looks at the flag for a minute, then picks up his books and walks out of the room. He says a million things without saying a word. I made a note to study David Petrakis. I have never heard a more eloquent silence. Thank you.
Thank you. Sounds like Mr. Neck would be a strong advocate of censorship. And it's just so striking that it was published when, 1999, right? And just like, does that sound fresh? It's super, super alarmingly, sadly fresh. Which is like both a testament, I think, to like these books that have been around for a while, like Whale Talks, that have been around that are still being read. It's obviously a testament to the value that those books have, right? But also, people have been kind of sitting back on these things, and like, it feels like a lot of what's happening now is also sort of revision. It's been like, oh wow, wait, what about all the books that we haven't been making a big stink of, or maybe not that big of a stink about? We can do it all now, right? It's got that kind of just kind of get everybody in line. And like, I love that. That's my favorite one. Like going through the list of reasons why banned, challenged, and restricted because it was thought to contain a political viewpoint. So the people that like none of this banning or challenging or censorship stuff, none of it expresses a political viewpoint. I just want to make that's a rhetorical question. Right? Yeah, that's funny. I think that's the only one that had that too. And I was like, at least from that year. I was like, oh, interesting. Scratch his chin. Thank you again for reading from it. So our next reader, I don't have a bio for you. I apologize. We're super stoked that you're here. I can't wait to hear what you're going to read. Please welcome Sophia Rivers.
Hi, everybody. I'm so grateful to be here. Thanks for everybody who organized this really important act of resistance. Thank you. So I'm going to read from Sex is a Funny Word. And this book was challenged, banned, and relocated for LGBTQIA+ content, for discussing gender identity and sex education, and for concerns that the title and illustrations were inappropriate. When I heard from Genderqueer, the line that said, "If I'm asexual, does my gender even matter?" I just felt this like just rush of like love for those people who were going through that. This book is for them. So this is written for 8 to 12-year-olds, but I have learned so much in the 3 years that I have learned this book. So I'm going to read the intro to the grown-up reader. And then if I have a couple of minutes, I'll read just from the beginning. This is a very different kind of children's book about sex. Most books about sex are full of answers. Answers can be helpful and reassuring, but they also tell us what to think and even how to think, instead of encouraging us to think for ourselves and to honor our own knowledge and experience. Most books about sex focus only on reproduction and intercourse. You'll find neither of these topics in our book. What Makes a Baby, the first book in this series, geared to younger readers, is about reproduction. The next book for older kids will include information on intercourse. I don't think that book is out yet, but I can't wait until that one comes out. Sex education is about more than science and the so-called facts of life. I believe the most important part of sex education is exploring and sharing our feelings, values, and beliefs, and helping kids connect what they learn to their communities, histories, families, and cultures. That's what this book allows you to do. We've provided the framework and basic information about bodies, gender, and touch, and we've left blanks that only you and the kids in your life can fill in. The truth is that sex is a fun word, but it's also a complicated one. So meaningful conversations about sex might not always feel easy or fun, but having them prepares all of us for life as it is. Sex is a funny word is here to help. How to use this book. This book is meant to be read over weeks, months, and years rather than just a few sittings. You'll find that it sparks different conversations and different ages and stages. Before you read the book with children or give it to children to read on their own, read it through yourself. Pay attention to the question pages at the end of each chapter. Think through your own answers or responses to those questions and think about how you would address those questions with the child. This is especially important for the last chapter in section 4 called Secret Touch, which deals with sexual abuse. This is a difficult topic for all of us. We don't want to imagine our children being sexually victimized, and many of us have our own experiences of sexual harassment and violence, which we can't help but bring to mind when thinking about the safety of children in our lives. Read over this chapter carefully before reading with a young person and give yourself time and permission to respond on your own before you try to read it with a child. Throughout the book, when you reach a question page, share your answers. If the children you are reading with aren't ready to share their own, don't pressure them. If you are patient and make room for kids to choose when to talk, eventually they will. Unique features of this book. Fun and interactive. Every chapter begins with a comic and ends with a question page or activity page. If kids want to skip ahead, let them. There's always time to go back later. Jargon-free. We avoid using terminology and identity labels whenever possible to make room for the different ways we describe ourselves. But we've also offered a glossary in the back of the book with words that can be hard to explain. No pressure. The only sexual activity in this book is masturbation and touching yourself, section 4. We'll address more behaviors in the last book in this series. Sex is a Funny Word was written and illustrated based on hundreds of conversations with children, parents, families, and professionals. We've included more resources and tips on talking with kids about sex in the Fun Reader's Guide, which is available at their website. Our work is always made richer through feedback, and we welcome your comments and questions. And that intro is by Corey Silverberg. So I just want to show you a few of the illustrations. The colors are just really beautiful and vibrant. The illustrations are so inviting for little kids and for me too. And here are the characters that are shown throughout the book. When I picked up this book 3 years ago, I was not as far along in my journey of exploring the ways that we're just taught that gender is a binary. And so I was trying to gender these people. And now, like, the more I read this book, the more I am open to all kinds of ideas, and I can talk to my kid about all kinds of things. So here are the 4 people in this book. This one is Zai, or maybe Zay. You can talk to your kid about how you likes climbing on things, music, shy people. Have you ever had chocolate milk on your cereal? I do on my birthday. 8.5 years old, favorite food, spaghetti. Favorite word this week, nerd. This year. Here's Cooper, likes candy, math, and swimming. I talk to animals, sometimes they talk back. 8 years old, nickname Coops, likes candy, math, and swimming. Dislikes brothers, rain, and homework. Favorite food, pancakes. Lives here. So here's Mimi, dislikes bossy people, spiders, being wrong. Favorite word of all time, fabulous. Likes comics, gaming, and skateboarding. Favorite food, falafel. When I grow up, I'm going to be a reporter, or maybe president, or an exobiologist, or maybe president. 9 years old, lives here. And then Omar. Whales are the largest mammals on Earth. It's a fact. Likes reading, movies, long sentences, dislikes big groups, yelling. Favorite food, burgers. Describe yourself in one word or less. Fastidious. Lives here. Thanks.
It's awesome. And it's like, what a great choice too, like, here's some instructions, that's good, yeah. Like that, I also, like coops. It's different. Anyway, that's always good. Our next reader is Jenna Isbell, who is a Potter activist and all-around baddie. They grew up in Censorshipville, Texas. Please welcome Jenna.
I'm being sacrilegious and reading from an ebook on my phone, so
It's all good.
don't. please
Books
don't
are
go reading
books.
hard. What, they're still books?
Yeah.
Oh, good to know. Correction.
Books are
So,
books.
as Sarah wrote my bio, because I completely forgot that you were supposed to write one, so I don't know if I'm that cool, but I'm
Not-
gonna take the compliment. And I can't find my.
Not a self-proclaimed
There it is.
baddie.
Okay, so I grew up in Plano, Texas, which is, not terrible, but I was kind of curious. I was like, so I wonder if they're banning any books right now. And the answer is yes. And the first book I wanted to read, because it was so absurd that it was on this list of banned books, is Culture and Values, A Survey of the Humanities, which is the textbook used for the humanities class in high school. To full disclosure, it was reinstated, but it was originally pulled because parents disagreed with the full frontal nudity of David by Michelangelo, Venus by Botticelli, and pretty much everything Goya has ever painted. So I guess to highlight the absurdity, I really wanted to just like stand up here for 5 minutes and read incredibly dry, boring art history from test. It's funny, like this textbook actually has terrible reviews, but it's mainly because it's an incredibly like condensed, glossed over version of history, not because it's just secretly pornographic. But yeah, that was, I was happy to see that, just, 2020, 2019, we cannot let children see Greek statues. And I shouldn't even say children, high schoolers, freshmen and sophomores cannot see. There were like, they've gone through and written down 48 paintings and sculptures that parents have found upsetting that their kids were. But I always love another excuse to buy more books. I could not find a reason to buy a terrible high school textbook and spend like $70 on it, even though it was used. And the ebook is $80. It's an ebook. So I then went through the list of YA books that are frequently banned. I will admit now that I'm in my 30s, I don't read a lot of YA. So, but I saw Pigman was on there, which was one of my favorites when I was in middle school. It was one of those first books that gave me the big sad, which I think is something. I'm sorry, I'm getting into real big slang. Like you're in middle school and you start having like, oh, I'm part of the world now, and things are big and sometimes complicated, and I don't know, I think about that time a lot. And so I picked out Pigman because it was contested when I was a kid, and it was contested for inappropriate language, presenting bad role models, pretty much teenagers being teenagers. We can't let teenagers be teenagers because then God forbid the teenagers will teenage. So it's still really relevant, especially if you just swap smoking for vaping. So yeah, I'm gonna be reading a little bit from the last chapter. This book was published in 1968. If you have been holding out till now and are worried about spoilers, then I'm sorry. Is Mr. Pignotti all right? What do you care? Lorraine had said that morning, but I did care. She thinks she knows everything that goes on inside me, and she doesn't know a thing. What did she want from me? To tell the truth all the time? To run around saying it did matter to me that I live in a world where you can grow old and be alone and have to get down on your hands and knees and beg for friends? A place where people just sort of forget about you because you get a little old and your mind's a bit senile or silly? Did she think that it didn't bother me underneath? That I didn't know if we hadn't come along, the pigman would have just lived like a vegetable until he died alone in that dump of a house? Do you think you'd like to go to the zoo with me tomorrow, Mr. Wandermeyer and Miss Sherman? Please? Please? Didn't you know how sick to my stomach it made me feel to know it's possible to end your life with only a baboon to talk to? And maybe Lorraine and I were only a different kind of baboon in a way. Maybe we were all baboons for that matter. Big, blabbing baboons, smiling away and not really caring what was going on as long as there was enough peanuts bouncing around to think about. The whole pack of us, Boar and the old lady, and Lorraine's mother included, baffled baboons concentrating on all the wrong things. Everything was so screwed up. Your problem is you've got too much spare time. That was the secret. Don't have any spare time. Watch the little things in life, the ones you have control over. Keep your eyes glued to the peas and every speck of dust on the floor. Kenneth is doing very nicely. To hell with Kenneth. To hell with marching along with an attaché case swinging in the breeze. The tile floor was cold and uncomfortable, and the attendant had dripped some water near me. As I stood up, 100 thoughts raced through my mind at the same time, one of which was to check Mr. Pignagi's wallet to make sure the police could identify him when they got there. I just realized I didn't introduce this book at all. Oops. So yes, it's a YA book about two teenagers who befriend an elderly man, and he is now just dropped dead at the zoo. Awkward moment for everyone. Including this one. As I stood up, 100 thoughts raced through my mind at the same time, one of which was to check Mr. Pignagi's wallet to make sure the police could identify him when they got there. When I wouldn't have to get involved at all. I was ashamed of thinking about myself, though actually it was Boar that I was thinking now. The position of Mr. Pignagi's head on the floor made his face look a little bit like my father's, and I didn't like that feeling. Up until then, I'd never been particularly disturbed about seeing a corpse. Even when I'd had to sit for an hour or so at a funeral parlor when some relative had died. To me, the dead body just looked like a doll, and all the flowers stuffed around here and there were sort of nice. It gave me a feeling like being in Beekman's toy department, to tell you the truth. Everything elaborately displayed. So many things to look at, anything to get away from what was really happening. I lit a cigarette and watched the smoke climb toward the light in the ceiling. There was such a chill in me and I couldn't stop my legs from shaking. And although I was standing in the same spot, I felt as if I were moving forward. My thoughts jumped from Mr. Pignagi's to wondering if Lorraine were waiting for me, to knowing I was standing in a monkey house stuck on top of a small planet whirling through space. Moving forward, it was like Lorraine's nightmare, where something forced her toward the room with the black curtains. And then I knew I was not in a monkey house. For a moment, it was something else, something I was glimpsing for the first time. The cold tiles, the draft that moved about me, the nice solid fact that someday I was going to end up in a coffin by myself. My tomb. That was all I was going to read. I realized everyone picked really funny ones, but that was the one I thought about. And yes, thank you very much, and read all the banned books.
Yes, thank you very much. And it makes me like, so many, when you look at the breakdown where books get banned, it's like mostly schools, libraries, or like public libraries are just behind it. It's like 38%, 34%. And then it's like a couple of other places. But one of the places that doesn't come up that I think if you're like, it would make sense if people weren't aware of it, but like one of the places where the books are the most restricted is in jails and prisons, incarcerated people, the access that they have to books. It's usually by state, I think, like the state sort of issues picked and like these are the books that you can't find. I encourage you to like go look at go look and see what books aren't available for incarcerated persons in Iowa and Illinois. Like it will shock you because there's another dimension to it, which is like a lot of those books are just about like getting free or ideas about freedom or like the Count of Monte Cristo or things like that. And so like you know, and you know, it's a complex issue for sure, but like also that's a whole space where like I know a lot of people who have had the opportunity to teach in different you know, prisons and jails and things like that, and like that's one of the things they always talk about is like what they can bring. Like I'm going to do a workshop this Saturday for a group of people. I'll just bring whatever poems I want, whatever writing I want to bring, and they're like, yeah, that's not, yeah, we've got to really pare it down, and they've got to submit everything in advance. So like, it's just another sort of like dimension to this issue, this problem. But it is worth checking out. In any case, because most of those people are going to be that kind in the world, probably not going to be better off than they were when they went in. And books can be a part of that. So, in any case, we've got two more readers. So our next reader is Emily Kingery, who's a poet and professor of English at St. Andrews University, right across the river. Her work appears widely in journals and has been selected for several honors and awards in poetry and prose. She's the author of the chapbook Invasives, coming out soon next year.
Yeah, pre-sales October.
Hey, there we go. Pre-sales. So like go out and buy those. Yeah, from Finishing Line Press, and is the president of the board of directors.
Right. I really love seeing hearing from all these books that have been challenged recently or are currently being challenged. And I didn't go that direction today. I went with the story of Ferdinand. Are you familiar with the story of Ferdinand, the children's book about the bull? Right. I love this book. It speaks to something very deep in me. Just run into the field and smell the flowers all day, right? But the book was published in the 1930s, and the publisher was a little nervous about this because the book takes place in Spain, and this is the same time of the onset of the Spanish Civil War. So, drawing, there's a lovely New York Times article about the whole history of the censorship of Ferdinand, if you want to just kind of do a Google search for it. But the publisher feared that the juxtaposition of a brutal Spanish war and a peaceable Spanish bull seemed more than coincidence to many observers, and fears of becoming wider conflict no doubt fueled such readings. And in the 30s, in the New Yorker, this was written. It said that Ferdinand has provoked all sorts of adult after-dinner conversations, which I don't know, sounds kind of great to me. Adult after-dinner conversations. Some say he's a rugged individualist. Some say he's a ruthless fascist who wanted his own way. God. Others say the tale is a satire on sit-down strikes. You see the idea. You see the idea, right? It's whatever you want to see in it, right? I find that children's literature is an all too convenient battleground for fragile adult egos, right? And I also love Ferdinand because I think that I mean, the villain is always, someone was saying this, or maybe this is like a meme or something, the villain is always toxic masculinity. And I think that it is here in Ferdinand as well. People were upset about the bull being too feminine, right? This emasculated kind of version of something that ought to be more masculine. And even the author, I think, was concerned that the people would think that Ferdinand was like a direct representation of him. And so he kind of went to great lengths to say, oh, no, I'm masculine in these different ways. So I think it's throwback to like the 1930s, but I think there's a lot of stuff that's still relevant here, especially if we're thinking about political ideologies and how people just have to pick and choose what they see in things. And it's just such a great story. Are you ready for the story? Yes. Oh, yes, me too. Great. It has beautiful illustrations, but it's like every page is like one sentence, and so I won't try to hold them up. Once upon a time in Spain, there was a little bull, and his name was Ferdinand. All the other little bulls he lived with would run and jump and butt their heads together, but not Ferdinand. He liked to sit just quietly and smell the flowers. He had a favorite spot out in the pasture under a cork tree. It was his favorite tree, and he would sit in its shade all day and smell flowers. Sometimes his mother, who was a cow, would worry about him. She was afraid he would be lonesome all by himself. Why don't you run and play with the other little bulls and skip and butt your head, she would say. But Ferdinand would shake his head. I like it better here, where I can just sit quietly and smell flowers. His mother saw that he was not lonesome, and because she was an understanding mother, even though she was a cow, she let him just sit there and be happy. Even though she was a cow. As the years went by, Ferdinand grew and grew until he was very big and strong. All the other bulls who had grown up with him in the same pasture would fight each other all day. They would butt each other and stick each other with their horns. What they wanted most of all was to be picked to fight with the bullfights in the trade. But not Ferdinand. He still liked to just sit quietly under the cork tree and smell the flowers. One day, 5 men came in very funny hats to pick the biggest, fastest, roughest bull to fight in the bullfights in the trade. All the other bulls ran around snorting and butting and leaping and jumping, so the men would think that they were very, very strong and fierce and pick them. Ferdinand knew that they wouldn't pick him. He didn't care. So he went up to his favorite cork tree. He didn't look where he was sitting. And instead of sitting on the nice cool grass in the shade, he sat on a bumblebee. Well, if you were a bumblebee and a bull sat on you, what would you do? You would sting him. And that is just what the bee did to Ferdinand. Wow, did it hurt? Ferdinand jumped up with a snort. He ran around puffing and snorting, butting and pawing the ground as if he were crazy. The 5 men saw him and they all shouted with joy. Here was the largest and fiercest bull of all, just the one for the bullfights in the trade. Took him away for the bullfight day in a cart. What a day it was. Flags were flying, bands were playing, and all the lovely ladies had flowers in their hair. They had a parade into the bull ring. First came the banderilleros with long sharp pins with ribbons on them to stick in the bull and make him mad. Next came the picadores, who rode skinny horses, and they had long spears to stick in the bull and make him madder. Then came the matador, the proudest of all. He thought he was very handsome and bowed to the ladies. He had a red cape and a sword and was supposed to stick the bull last of all. Then came the bull, and you know who that was, don't you? They called him Ferdinand the Fierce, and all the banderilleros were afraid of him, the picadores were afraid of him, and the matador was scared stiff. Ferdinand ran to the middle of the ring, and everyone shouted and clapped because they thought he was going to fight fiercely and butt and snort and stick his horns around. But not Ferdinand. When he got to the middle of the ring, he saw the flowers and all the lovely ladies' hair, and he just sat down quietly and smelled. He would fight and be fierce, no matter what they did. He just sat and smelled. And the banderilleros were mad, and the picadores were madder, and the matador was so mad he cried because he couldn't show up with his cape and sword. So they had to take Ferdinand home. And for all I know, he is sitting there still, under his favorite cork tree, smelling the flowers, just quietly. He is very happy.
Thank you. I love that one. It's so funny. It's like Ferdinand the Rorschach test. Like I haven't heard all the different like interpretations, but like the fascist one is funny because like we've been censored. And to that point, this Ferdinand was banned. It was banned several places, but one of the places it was banned was in Nazi Germany because it promoted pacifism.
Yeah, burned it.
And I learned that fact at a banned books reading or something. Full circle moment. Thank you so much. Our final reader for the evening, longtime Scott Community College professor for 38 years, spent all over the theater scene, ran some of the earliest poetry slams online. So looking forward to this reading. Please welcome John Turner. John.
Thank you so much for having me again. Oh, and this is 28 years. Don't make me older than I am, please. So where are we all standing with the Rings of Power? Anybody watching that? Boy, I taught Tolkien for 25 years, and they missed a great chance. They could have named this show Sammy Sosa Hits a Big One, because there's just as much about baseball in it as there is about Middle Earth. What does thou say, Dark Elf? Speak to us. Babu! Did the Dark Elf just say he had 2 balls? Yes, he did. Isn't that normal for an elf? The only thing they've gotten right in that show, in all this time, is that a human, or a dwarf, or an elf, or a hobbit, or a mermaid can be any color it wants to be. So, I love Edgar Allan Poe. And I really love this edition of the annotated Poe. It's a terrific book. How much do I love Poe? My youngest daughter's middle name is Lenore. So, there you go. And I always, the first story that really grabbed me as a child was The Mask of the Red Death. I've always been overwhelmed by that suite of rooms that Du Prospero had. The blue, the purple, the green, the orange. I so much wanted to own those rooms. In fact, I tried to paint them myself and found out that my painting skills were a greater horror than anything Poe could dream up. Bob Ross and I wouldn't have gotten along at all. Here's some gas in the clouds up here. And yet no illustrator with pen or pencil or computer or oils has ever come close to making that suite of rooms that I see in my head. Now, Poe, of course, is banned quite often because of his horror and his use of witchcraft and stuff like that. And this is an example of what happens when you throw out something because there's one little part you don't like. You throw out all this beautiful stuff, the baby with the bathwater routine, and people like me who have been inspired all their life to write and do poetry and teach would have never happened if they couldn't have read Poe to begin with. So here's just a little of that part of the story. Some of the most expressive writing I've ever found in my life. If you haven't read the story, shame on you, but go find it. And basically, there's a plague, Red Death, and Prospero and his friends decided to lock themselves away and entertain themselves forever. Boy, doesn't that sound good. This is the process and where they are. The courtiers, having entered, brought furnaces and massy hammers and welded the bolts. They resolved to leave means neither of ingress or egress to the sudden impulses of despair or of frenzy from within. The abbey was amply provisioned. With such precautions, the courtiers might bid with defiance to the contagion. The external world could take care of itself. In the meantime, it was folly to grieve or to think. The prince had provided all the appliances of pleasure. There were buffoons, there were improvisatori, there were ballet dancers, there were musicians, there was beauty, there was wine. All these and security were without. Within, without the Red Death. It was toward the close of the 5th or 6th month of his seclusion, and while the pestilence raged most furiously abroad, that the Prince Prospero entertained his 1,000 friends at a masked ball of the most unusual magnificence. It was a voluptuous scene, that masquerade. But first let me tell you of the rooms in which it was held. There were 7, an imperial suite. In many palaces, however, such suites form long and straight vistas, while the folding doors slide back nearly to the walls on either side, so that the view of the whole extent is scarcely impeded. Here, the case was very different, as might have been expected from the Duke's love of the bizarre. The apartments were so irregularly disposed that the vision embraced but little more than one at a time. There was a sharp turn at every 20 or 30 yards, and at each turn, a novel effect. To the right and left, in the middle of each wall, a tall and narrow Gothic window looked out upon a closed corridor, which pursued the windings of the suite. These windows were of stained glass, whose color varied in accordance with the prevailing hue of the decorations of the chamber into which it opened. That, at the eastern extremity, was hung, for example, in blue, and vividly blue were its windows. The second chamber was purple in its ornaments and tapestries, and here the panes were purple. The third was green throughout, and so were the casements. The fourth was furnished and lighted with orange, the fifth with white, the sixth with violet. The 7th apartment was closely shrouded in black velvet tapestries that hung all over the ceiling and down the walls, falling in heavy folds upon a carpet of the same material and hue. But in this chamber only, the color of the windows failed to correspond to the decorations. The panes here were scarlet, a deep blood color. Now, in no one of the 7 apartments was there any lamp or candelabra, amid the profusion of golden ornaments that lay scattered to and fro or depending from the roof. There was no light of any kind emanating from lamp or candle within the suite chambers. But in the corridors that followed the suite, there stood, opposite to each window, a heavy tripod bearing a brazier of fire that projected its rays through the tinted glass and so glaringly illumined the room. Thus were produced a multitude of gaudy and fantastic appearances. But in the western black chamber, the effect of the firelight that streamed upon the dark hangings through the blood-tinted panes was ghastly in the extreme, and produced so wild a look upon the countenances of those who entered, that there were few in the company old enough to set foot within its precincts at all. It was in this apartment also that there stood against the western wall a gigantic clock of ebony. Its pendulum swung to and fro with a dull, heavy, monotonous clang. When the minute hand made the circuit of the face, and the hour must be stricken, there came from the brazen lungs of the clock a sound which was clear and loud and deep and exceedingly musical, but of so peculiar a note and emphasis that at each lapse of an hour, the musicians of the orchestra were constrained to pause momentarily in their performance to hearken to the sound. And thus the waltzers perforce ceased their evolutions. And there was a brief disconcert of the whole gay community. And while the chimes of the clock yet rang, it was observed that the giddiest grew pale, and the more aged and sedate passed their hands over their brows as if in confused reverie or meditation. But when the echoes had fully ceased, a light laughter at once pervaded the assembly. The musicians looked at each other and smiled as if at their own nervousness and folly, and made whispering vows, each to the other, that the next chiming of the top clock should produce in them no such emotion. And then, after the lapse of 60 minutes, which embraced 3,600 seconds of the time that flies, there came yet another chiming of the clock, and then were the same disconcert and tremulousness and meditation as before. You have to read the rest of your answer.
Thank you much, John. Give it up one more time for all of our readers. Yeah, is there a certain?
Yeah, there's survey, you can either do the QR code route or do a paper one. You can do that now.
I do want to thank Lisa, Kara for all their help tonight. Setting
Yeah,
up
thank
and
you,
getting
Kara.
this down.
Because that's what I do here. We recently added an I Read Bands book, I Read Band book t-shirt to our Rock Island Library t-shirt store. And so through Red Gun, and so if your wardrobe is lacking a band books week t-shirt, that's the real one to it. We mentioned the book discussion house. You can register for the event and check out a look at our service ducks at Earl. And also we have, it is the 150th anniversary of the Rock Island Public Library this year. We'll be kicking off that anniversary celebration with our Freeze lecture series, which is the ideas that change everything, just like public libraries change everything. And we'll have a kickoff party and anniversary celebration